love to share my platform with amazing women, and you happen to be one of those amazing women. Welcome.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Hannah. I'm so honored to be a part of anything you do. As you mentioned earlier, we met in an amazing course around the dark feminine and really dipping into our feminine power and our seduction. And it's just been such a lovely journey to get to watch you go on and to be on myself. And you know, invited me here and so I just want to introduce myself. My name is Deborah Kat. I am the host of the Better Sex podcast. I've been a professional dominatrix and a certified Tantra educator for over 20 years, working with couples and singles, supporting them in having better sex. And personally, my belief is that better sex creates a better world and a safer world. You know, our sexual energy is all about creation. And so we can use it to create beautiful, peaceful experiences, or we can create non-peaceful, beautiful experiences. And so it's really about learning how to harness that energy to mix it and match it with our own heart energy and that of others, and to just radiate ourselves and this beauty out into the world.
1000% agree. And some people might be thinking, why are we talking about sex and intimacy when kombucha camp is all about fermentation? And I think the themes that really overlap here are that of symbiosis, of needing to be in community. And part of what we do as fermenters is we take raw materials and we transform them, we elevate them, we provide a new way in which we can enjoy and experience them. And I feel like really great sex can do that. And probably a lot of us may not even totally know what really great sex is, simply because we have been simply because we have been fed this sort of, you know, Hollywood version where we never see the actual outcome or the challenges of the relationship. It's just happily ever after. Or we have this sort of simulation of sex. And now, of course, there's a lot more porn and things like this. So people are getting different kind of perspectives on what sex could look like. However, sex without intimacy is a totally different type of animal than I think what you and I are going to talk about today, which is more where you're bringing your full self, where you're bringing your heart and soul into that process. And it isn't simply an act in order to stimulate. However, there's a deeper sort of purpose underneath that. So how do you sort of contextualize the world with this easy accessibility to watching sex acts versus sort of how we then try to relate to other human beings?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, first of all, sex is one of those things that on the one side, it is incredibly simple, and yet, you know, it's basically two bodies coming together and doing what they do. However, you know, we have so many layers put on top of that. So what I mean by that is, you know, for some people, sex is just like recreation, it's stress release, and that's awesome. Anything that releases stress, you know, calmer beings, more power. But on top of that, you know, for most of us, we put a desire to connect. We put a desire to be approved of. We put emotional, you know, for some people, it is the only place where they are allowed to show their emotions, right? So we put all of these layers on top of sex, and then it gets really complicated. Because if I come to you, and what sex means to me is connection and approval, and on your side of the fence, if what connection or what sex is more recreation and stress release and a little bit of connection in there, then we've got very different intentions for what we're going to do. And unfortunately, sometimes that can leave people feeling unfulfilled, if you will. And, you know, the way I like to think about sex is I use two metaphors here. The first is music, right? As as embodied creatures, we have these amazing instruments, right? And most of us never really learn how to play them, right? There's no instructions. So if we figure out how to play chopsticks, we're accomplished, right? However, it's like there are all of these possibilities. We can play punk, we can play jazz, we can play, classical, all of these things. And then we can play with others. And so learning how to play our own instrument and then getting to play in a duet or perhaps a quartet or maybe join the orchestra and find how we harmonize, how we interact with each other, opens up so much possibility. And it's, as I said earlier, it's like when we get into this energy, when we get into the sexuality, like that's creative juice, right? And so we can use that energy to create a human being or a business or just a beautiful connection for the evening. And so all of these different aspects are possible when, within this context of sex.
Well, and I think that makes, I think what we're speaking to is something deeper, right? Because there's an urge, there's a sexual desire, but that doesn't mean you can only then act on it in a sexual way. And I think that there's a confusion because, like you said, there's no owner's manual, there's no one way or right way to do things. There's many different ways that we can sort of understand ourselves. And there's also a lot of cultural fear and shame and all kinds of darkness that gets put upon it as well. And that can just create more confusion. But this urge, this natural desire that springs forth from us can then be channeled in so many different ways. And I think that, we don't learn about that because we don't talk about it in a really open format. And so some of the ways that I experience it is like I'll have a desire, I'll be turned on by something, a conversation, a situation, and then where can we then take that energy and move it into creativity, not necessarily having to act on it. I also tend to find I'm sexually attracted to a lot of my friends, but not in a way that I would then want to move forward and act on it. It's just a natural chemical reaction that's happening because I've found people I like. And so I think maybe a lot of us can relate to that type of experience. You want to have friends in your life who you like, and we all know attraction is more than just, a physical presentation. There's so much more to it. So, figuring out how to navigate those boundaries and create that intimacy. What are some of the ways in which you help folks who maybe feel, restricted or less comfortable talking about these things? How do you help them?
Sure. So first of all, I want to just tell a quick story. So when I want to say I was probably about 22, I went to massage school. And there was this man, and for whatever reason, when we got into proximity with each other, something happened to my body, right? There was this immediate sensational experience. Like even talking about it, I can feel it, right? It was this bubbly feeling that would come up through my body, and there was heat, and I would end up like smiling and just like radiating out, right? Like he would get into my presence and I was just become this really radiant being. And he was super clear. He was very boundaried, and he just let me know. It's like, look, I'm a married man. We have chemistry. We have energy together. And what this means is that we can enjoy each other's company in this context, right? We can be together in group situations. I'm not interested in being with you alone. And, I just want you to be very clear. This is not going to escalate anywhere. Right. And it was the first time that anybody had really kind of talked about what was, talked about the fact that, this energy existed. But then what he said to me was, this energy is yours. This energy is for you to do, it can be a healing energy where you use it for yourself. It can be a healing energy that you know, transmit and share with others. And it can be channeled into, you know, projects that you want, or manifestation, meaning that like I can use this energy to have more of the things that I want and desire in my life. And so I'm super grateful for that experience, because for one, it gave me the physical experience of what was possible, what this sexual, sensual energy was. And it was like a very clear message that it didn't have to go anywhere. And that like, and that it was mine. I think that's one of the things that's so interesting when I work with couples. So I do a lot of work with couples, but using the metaphor of learning how to play their own bodies, there is this idea that we have that other people know how to play our bodies better than we do, right?
Yes. Why do we have that? Why do we think that? I don't know.
Well, I can tell you, I think that I got it from Harlequin romances, right?
Mm.
I was like, you know, in my teens, in my impressionable years, I was a Harlequin romance reader. And if you think about it, the whole story is that there is a young woman who doesn't have a whole lot of experience. There is an older man who generally does and who generally has a bad reputation. And they have crazy chemistry, and she has no idea what's going on. And he at some point makes a move on her and is able to essentially play her body to in a way that she's never experienced before. But it's all about him knowing what to do to her. And there's very little of her knowing what to do for herself, let alone how to ask for it. And so,
Well,
you know,
let me just pause right here, because what you just described sounds like an initiation into a magical ceremony. I don't know, there's something about like not knowing, being led, learning to use a power that before you never had access to. So I think, again, the metaphor is here is that, you know, this is a palpable energy that can be used in so many ways. So you're right. This comes from the culture. The culture feeds us this concept that we can't possibly understand or use this energy ourselves. Or if we do, we're considered, you know, bad or evil or sinning, or, you know, all of those sort of negative things going. And so it seems like we haven't been allowed to, if you will, develop a healthier version of, first and foremost, understanding ourselves, and then, of course, how that can be enhanced or changed or shifted when you come into contact with somebody else.
right, right. And then, you know, just to follow up on the story about like, you know, so what happens is there is the initiation, right? And then in the more progressive books, she actually does sort of start to learn, oh, this is a power that I have, and how do I use it? But the power is always in terms of how to bring a man in, right? And so, you know, there's a tiny bit of teaching there in like, oh, you've got this magnetic power. However, when we take it out of context of just bringing someone else in, you know, not that that's a bad thing, but like realizing that we can bring in more than that, that we can use this energy, to magnetize that which we want, and then to have the energy to take the steps that it takes to get there, right? I think that's a really big part that seems to be left out of a lot of manifestation stories, is that like, you know, there's me here, there's my goal here, but there's all these steps that I need to take. However, my desire and my sexual energy is the fuel to get me from point A to point B, right? It's the stuff, it's the stuff, you know, that like if I listen to some of my crazier ideas when I'm turned on, I'm like, huh, I would never have thought I wanted to do that. Like, for instance, I had this moment. And just, you know, when I talk about sexual energy, I'm talking about the energy that comes from the, you know, in the body, that rises up. And you can experience it both sexually, but you can also, if you're somebody that, like, so I'm a dancer. I love to dance and move my body. And I have, you know, the energy that gets raised when I go dancing is sexual energy, right? It comes from the body. It comes from the pelvis, from the you know, the genitals. You know, it is generative energy. But so, you know, I'm out on the dance floor, I'm doing my thing, and this idea comes up of like, wow, I want to bring people together to talk about sex. I want to do a summit. And I'm like, oh, but that's a crazy idea, right? So I kind of step away and, you know, just, I'm like, you know, put the kibosh on that idea, because it's like, it's a big idea. Like, that's bigger than anything I've done before. But it keeps coming up. It keeps rising up. And as it rises up, I'm like meeting people who would be great guests. I'm meeting people who have the skills that I need. And so it's like there's this way in which when I hold the thought of like, this is possible, and create the intention and move the energy together, things happen. Like, people and resources come toward me, and I know which people and resources I need to go towards.
Well, like you're saying, it's this magnetic energy. And I'm a Scorpio, so genitals is my jam. It's sort of my zone. It's one of my zones of genius, if you will. And you know, there's this trend called vabbing, which I don't know, we didn't have a name for it back in the day, but it's where in a way, what I'm trying to say is there's a metaphorical vabbing that's going on here, in the sense that you're taking your essence, your juices, this exciting energy that you're creating, and yet you're dousing other projects with that energy in a way so that it will attract and bring to you, you know, the fruition of what that generative energy is. And so, I don't know, that just sounds really fun and exciting and juicy. And I think there's been this really great shift. I know there's been some wonderful teachers, Mama Gina and some different folks. I know Christina leans into it, yourself, and all the people you work with, where there's just this, you know, working from a place of feeling turned on, instead of being afraid of our sexuality, instead of being, you know, into a specific box about it. And the reason I talk about it so much is because, you know, my parents met in a cult church. This was, they didn't stay in it throughout my entire childhood. So I had a chance to kind of explore and let go of, you know, some of the more dogmatic aspects of Christianity. But you certainly see it played out both in our culture, which can't help but be a Christian impacted culture here in the United States, because those are the people who came here and set up the laws and everything. And in sort of how we're seeing it wanting to transform and change in this modern society. And yet how, in a way, things are always what they have been, which is this generative, exciting life force. And how do we channel that so that we're able to do the things in our life that really feel good to us, and not just because that's what society says we're supposed to do, right? So there's a sort of conflict here, if you will.
Right. You know, it's funny. I hear that. And at the same time, like, it's so do what I say, not what I do. And
hypocritical, but this is like it baked into the Christianity, right? Like the whole time they're telling you what to do, in the background they're doing things they're not supposed to, right? Like that to me feels like the Christian experience, at least here in the United States.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't really speak to that because that's not my background. But what I can speak to is going to services as a child, right? What are we doing? We're moving, we're singing, we're connecting with each other, right? Like when we use so just, you know, the three of the more foundational practices of Tantra. And Tantra is, you know, one of the big things around Tantra is using sexual energy to have more of what you want in the world, right? So three of the big principles of that is movement, is breath, is sound. And, you know, I grew up with going to services, Jewish services as a kid. And, you know, one of the big things was there was always dancing. There was all, you know, so there's the movement piece. There was singing and chanting. And, you know, so there's the sounding piece. And then, you know, then just, you know, having that connecting piece, it's like, you know, it was a big piece. It's like, we are all here together in this congregation, in this group, looking forward in the same direction, right? And so I think it's subtle and it's not so subtle at the same time. But what I wanted to just say is, you know, just a really practical daily example of how we use this energy, right? So most of us sit at desks for many, many hours of the day. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll get stuck on a problem or something I'm working on. And it feels like at some point, it's like the problem is here, right? I have no vision. Like it's just so all consuming, but I can't actually see what it is, right? And so what'll happen is at a certain point, I'm like, yeah, okay, I need to concentrate on something else. Now, I know my pattern well enough. So what I'll do is I'll turn some music on, I'll get moving, I'll get, you know, and in moving, generally speaking, the hips get moving, the shoulders get moving, you know, lots of movement going on. But what'll happen is that energetic change will happen. Right. And chances are, you know, when I sit down again, the problem is out here. And so I can actually see the whole thing. And I can, you know, I'll come up with some creative solutions for it. Right. So, I mean, this is very practical stuff here.
Right. So anybody who's feeling stuck, get up, move, and allow that energy to flow through you, and hopefully that creates a perspective and some ideas that then you can reapply to the situation that's weighing on you or is right in front of you.
Right. I mean, I can't tell you how many. I work a lot with. So I'm very close to Silicon Valley. So I work a lot with you know, people who are in the technical industry, doing a lot of coding, doing a lot of brain stuff. And with those clients, you know, it is so important to get them down into their bodies, right? Like, you know, sometimes we always start with, when working together, we always start with a grounding and a moving piece because that's what we do. And it's funny because it's like I'll often have somebody say to me, wow, this is the first time I've thought about my body all day. And I just find that so fascinating because, like, I mean, I really feel like I have, you know, whatever comes before us and whatever comes after us may or may not be embodied. But in between, we are embodied creatures. We have these amazing instruments, right? And we get to play them. And so, you know, not just so for me, everything we do is playing the instrument, whether it's slowing down to actually taste every nuanced taste in our mouth before we swallow, or, you know, only wearing clothes that feel good to our bodies, you know, having things that please our eyes and our ears around us. You know, this is all playing the body. This is all learning how to be in our bodies as embodied creatures, and how to use what we got.
Yes, I mean, and create beauty. And I love what you're talking about here, because I think beauty is a vital nutrient. Again, it's like one of these things you can't take, you know, a beauty vitamin, if you will, but it's how you approach your surroundings. It's how you were, like you were saying, the textures. Like, I'm very much someone who composes her outfit. I want to have, you know, all the right jewels and different touches, and you know, that is so fun and exciting and creative for me. And I just feel, in a way, again, back to the magic, it's like this is part of when I go out into the world, this is part of the protective energy that I'm putting on myself because there's intention behind it. And so I think sort of what's underneath all of this is intention. What is the energy we're bringing to this situation? Like even the embodied part, there's no intention in the body because everything that's being used is up in the head. And so to bring purposeful focus onto the body is just such a simple thing that you can do, and just be present with it. I think being present is so hard in our society. And so I love your teachings and your coaching, how it just really brings people back to that present moment. And, true confession, I didn't know that much about Tantra, so I'm excited to hear those different principles. What are some of those other practical points that can really help folks who maybe want to cultivate more of this beauty and intention in their life now?
Sure. So you were talking about presence, right? And presence is, at least for me, presence is being in this time, this place, this moment, not in the past and not thinking about the future. And one of the best ways to do that, and, so I run an event called Tantra Speed Date. And one of the things I know is the men who cultivate presence are the men that attract women, right? Doesn't matter what they look like. It can be it's how they feel. And so, and what really good presence means is I'm grounded, meaning that I have connection to earth. I have connection to genitals. I have connection to my sexual energy, and I have connection to my heart. And what that means is I am able to be here with you in this moment, connected to myself and available for the connection here. So the way that's cultivated is basically, as I said, starting with ground, imagining that we're sending those roots down into the earth, that two-way experience is happening, that letting go of what doesn't serve us so mama can make something beautiful, that bringing that nourishing, loving energy up into our bodies and filling ourselves so that we have that two-way connection with earth, and then bringing that nourishing energy into our genitals. And one way we can do that is we imagine that energy comes up, and then we bring our attention to our genitals and we give a little squeeze or a lift using the PC muscles, or the muscles that cut off the stream of urine. So we bring that energy up, we give a little squeeze, and then we release. Anything that doesn't serve us, give it back to Mama Earth, bringing that nourishing energy in, holding for a moment, letting go. And then we imagine that energy comes up through our pelvises, through our genitals, into our hearts, right? So that energy comes up, fills our heart space. Anything that doesn't serve us in this time, in this place, any of those cold places that we've been holding on to, we just let that go. Give it up to Mama Earth. She loves that energy. So that energy is coming through our roots, into our sex, into our creativity center, into our heart, into our love center. And we're able to be we're able to be in the presence of ourselves and another. So how does that land for you?
I love it. I'm sort of thinking of the different chakras, right? So I'm layering in different types of modalities here, and also recognizing, because I do the rooting into the earth and I bring the energy up. I just don't necessarily make that conscious lift. And yet that's exactly what that energy is when you feel that energy, you can then take it, you can harness it, you can put it in different places. And I absolutely love radiating through the heart space, because I think, I don't know, I'm, as I'm sort of in my own path and journey and exploring different things, like I have this sort of decision-making process that goes through the chakras. And it's so important that once you sort of feel it out through the different ones, that you then filter it through love. And using that as sort of one of those, before you speak it, right? Before it comes through the throat chakra, before it's expressed, right? We've already visioned it. We've confirmed it's part of the templates we're receiving in our crown. We've connected with the earth. And then as long as it also then passes that love test, then it can be expressed. And so I'm loving everything you're saying because it's dovetailing in so many different ways. And hopefully other people have, whether it's this practice specifically or another way to think about this. But, you know, we are so cut off from our bodies. The media presents images that we're supposed to, you know, attempt to mirror that aren't real or realistic. So I love what you're saying about presence and attraction having nothing to do with sort of your external appearance.
Oh God,
And it has everything to do with what's, you know, radiating and gushing out through your beingness.
yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things I always say for people when they're looking for their mate, whatever that mate is it's like, yes, have the list, know what your deal breakers are, know what your values are, know what kind of union you're looking to create. But then once you actually get in front of the person, throw the list away and see how it feels in your body, right? Because I don't know about you, but I have had people who they check every box, they look so good on paper, right? And their packaging is exquisite. It's what I would like in my packaging, right? And then I get in their presence and I'm like, I feel contracted, or I feel a lot of, you know, I feel that nervous energy, which a lot of people, you know, that having energy moving at all, you know, is often what people refer to as chemistry, right? And there's the kind of feeling where you're feeling tense and uncomfortable, or there's the kind of energy where you're like, oh, this is kind of interesting, this is kind of exciting. And there's a real difference, but it's like, again, we're not invited to check in with the body as to what it is that, you know, we're actually feeling. And it does take a little time to actually start learning what your body's signaling, you know.
Well, this is what we call trust your gut. Now, when we're talking about it, it's usually about, so when I consume something, so maybe you have candida overgrowth and it drives you to eat sugar. And so sugar, we think it tastes good. We put it on our tongues. It's delicious. But then you have this really awful feeling later, right? And so trusting your gut isn't trusting your taste buds, and it's closing the feedback loop. And so what you're talking about here is, you know, sort of what we would call a gut reaction to someone's energy. And so another way that we think about it is microbes are magic, and we're covered in a microbial field. And so sometimes this signals, this information, this energy that's flowing, is it our microbes are communicating? They use quorum sensing. We don't totally, you know, we don't totally see or understand how that happens, hence why we call it magic, because we don't see the process that's happening here. And yet we're getting information. And you can see someone who's so, like, we've all heard of this stereotype, right? Like someone's so beautiful, but then you get around them and they're just, their personality is so ugly, they instantly, you know, become a really unattractive person to you, even though from an external, you know, thought process, you might think, oh, this person's so beautiful. And just to your point of like how much of that energy that we actually pick up on and that our bodies can tell us. And so to your point, just really listening and trusting that information is so crucial. But I also love the idea of the list, because that's exactly how I manifested my husband. And, you know, it's interesting because I wrote my list and then I said, you know what, I'm going to trust the universe. When he asked me out on a date, I did not remember what he looked like. I just knew I had made this deal with the universe. And so I said yes for the date. And here we are. We're coming up on 20 years, and it's pretty tremendous. And, you know, and in 20 years, you can't help but live how many lifetimes, right? Like,
Right.
we've changed so much. Yeah. You're in a 19-year relationship yourself, right?
Yeah, I've been with my partner for 22 years. And I have to say that, you know, COVID was good to us. In many ways, we got to rediscover each other. We got to fall back in love with each other. We were already kind of starting that process, but, you know, I have to say, like, 22 years together, there is probably a good chunk in there where we were in tolerating mode, and we were just kind of like scooching along there. And And then when I started leading Tantra Speed Date again, parts of me started waking up again, and parts of me were like, oh, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to teach this shit, I need to practice it, right?
Right.
And so yeah, so I was like, okay, I'm going to, you know, I'm going to practice these things with my partner. I'm going to practice falling in love with you. I'm going to practice like being in my own sensational body and allowing you to be magnetized to me. I'm going to allow myself to be magnetized to you. I am going to practice seeing you and feeling you in your highest and your best, right? I'm going to notice like, oh, we're having a disagreement. Where in my body do I feel that? Oh, I feel it in my heart. Oh, I know that heart is about connection. That means that I'm holding back here. You know, how do I want to open? How do I want to be, you know, how do I want to be vulnerable? You know, and it was just so, you know, it already started that process. And then like, you know, when we had to spend so much time together, it was like navigating space and navigating, you know, navigating the times that we would come together and the times that we would step away from each other, and how do we do that in space. And so yeah, I don't even remember exactly.
No, I think what you're hitting on are a couple of really important things. So one is boundaries, which you mentioned earlier that I forgot to call out and really love, because I think that when we create healthy boundaries, it allows us so much more room and freedom to play. You know, I went to an event where the boundary was, you know, no sexual contact or anything. But within that, I had the freedom to flirt and be silly because I knew that nothing was going to move beyond the play that was happening in that situation. And when you can create healthy boundaries where both people are really clear what that is, and of course, then they have to be respected, but there's so much freedom for what you can do. And I'm sure you know this in your relationship, right? Like there are boundaries you have with your partner, and yet you also need the freedom to be able to explore and do other things to help your clients. And
absolutely. And you know what you're saying here also, you know, hearing you say that reminds me, because I was working with clients around this just yesterday, where it's like there's this expectation of escalation, right? And so
yes,
when we actually come together and we're saying like, okay, we're going to actually take escalation off the table for now.
right.
What's possible here, right? And
Yes.
I was working with a couple just yesterday. They've been together for 5 years, and when we started talking about, well, what is foreplay? What do you actually like there? I mean, they literally looked at each other and were like, we don't really, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, so here's your assignment. Your assignment, should you take it on? So I have to say, one of my favorite sex toys is the timer on your phone, right?
Hmm.
Because here's the thing. The way I think about things is it's like we want to, you know, we want to be explorers together, right? We want to explore our bodies, each other's bodies, and how they work together. And we could do just about anything for 15 minutes, right? So I invite people to set a timer and choose who's going to be the doer and who's going to be the receiver. And, you know, make an agreement. It's like, I'm not going to tolerate anything that feels horrible, but I am going to just sort of not, you know, refrain from directing everything for 15 minutes. If something doesn't feel good, you know, we've got ways of communicating it, but allowing my body to be explored by my partner for 15 minutes. And then I invite them, like, if something feels good, you want to like move in and make some sound. I want more of that, you know, or move back and, you know, don't make a sound. But anyway, it's like for 15 minutes, one person is the giver or the explorer, the other is the receiver or the new territory, as I like to say. And so, you know, they get that chance to explore a bit. And then I invite them to, like, you know, take a break. And like within, you know, I don't suggest that they go right from one person being the explorer, you know, and switch right away. But I do invite them to switch it up from time to time, you know, so that they can experience, like, oh wow, I've never spent a lot of time touching the back of your neck. I've never spent a lot of time touching your inner thighs, or, you know, your knees, or whatever that place is. But learning how to touch your partner and learning how to
Yeah.
be touched.
Touch is so powerful. It is so healing. It is so nourishing. So one of my things I'm always advocate is healthy, non-sexual, non-threatening touch. You know, as human beings, being bacteriosapiens, and again, we see this in our SCOBY, how it throws out these fibers of cellulose in order to create our pellicle, is we yearn for connection. We need connection. We need to live in symbiosis, and we need other people there. You know, and we see this in scientific experiments, or where, you know, horrible abuse cases where children were left and they die because there's no touch. And so I think we undervalue how important it is, and how it's important to have that safe, healthy, non-threatening touch, even if it is also sexual at the same time, as long as it fits those other parameters, and meaning it's acceptable. That's all good. But also, even just hugging friends or touching someone's back. And I know we've been in an era where we have felt removed from our comfort levels of being able to do that. And hopefully people are recognizing just how important and how nutritious, how much we need to soak up that information. And the second thing I wanted to bring out, the tolerance. Like, it's not in the romance novels where once you're in that relationship, what happens is all of your shit, your literal shit, your family stuff, your trauma, your issues come out to play, and they get projected oftentimes on the screen of your partner. And so what's happening is, you know, and really what I think relationships are for us to heal from. The problem is if you get stuck in a loop, which happened to me at one point, where I was just making him my monster. I just kept projecting this, you know, you're trying to sabotage me, right? It would go through this cycle. And finally, I had to get some help. And once I got help and was able to end that cycle, now our relationship, there's more trust. We can, you know, we can connect more deeply because there isn't this sort of at odds. But I think that's the piece of, you know, the wedding puzzle. I'm like, don't spend the $30,000 on the marriage, spend it on the 30-year anniversary, because that's the milestone you need to mark, is the one that says, hey, I committed, I made it through, we made it work. We, you know, it wasn't perfect per se. And yes, there were periods where maybe we didn't like each other, but we were able to continuously have a common space of respect and figuring things out. And both were making progress and evolution. I think that's what's most important, is as long as each person is willing, you know, everyone's timeline is going to be different. And at the end of the day, look, sometimes you have to leave a person or situation because it simply is out of harmony. Like, I've always known in my body when it's time for me to go, right? As much as like something in the head might be a certain way, it's really about like my body is like, yes, this is working, or no, this isn't. And that is what's telling me to stay or to go. And it doesn't matter, right? Like, you end up in the arguments and in the thises and the that's, but then as long as you can come back together and find that common point and keep doing the work, that's what I think makes a successful marriage.
Yeah, I definitely, you know, it's interesting because I'll say I've been in a relationship for 22 years and people were like, oh my God, that's great. And I'm like, yeah, I appreciate that's accurate. However, I have seen relationships that lasted 6 months that were absolutely, you know, what was needed, absolutely healing, absolutely loving. So it's really the content of what's going on for those folks. I mean, one of the my favorite testimonials that anybody's ever given me was like, we had the most amazing breakup because we were able to, you know, be in our own experience and love the person and realize that like our values were different. Like, we were looking for different kinds of unions. And I think that's something that we don't spend a lot of time at. I mean, when we make the list, we make the list of qualities that we want in somebody. We don't necessarily make the list of how we want to feel and what it is the intention of the union. You know, for some people, there's different intentions. You know, my union is about support and companionship. You know, we don't have children. Well, we have cats, but you know, so we are like, that is a focus for us, but like we're not nurturing new life. We're not consolidating and accumulating, you know, land and realms. You know, it's really about companionship. It's really about like, can I be with this person and love this person? And you know, I feed him and he feeds me, and we nourish each other. And can he be okay with my picadillos? Because I have a bunch of them. And can I
Sure.
be okay with his? And, you know, I love the image when you were talking about the scobies coming together. Like, that's so us. We're little scobies coming together,
Yeah.
reaching for each other. That's just such a great metaphor.
Well, gosh, this conversation has been so fascinating. How do people find you? How do they find your work? And maybe let's just share exactly what you do and then how people can get in touch with you.
Sure. So, you know, it's funny, as this conversation was going, I realized what I really wanted to offer people is Tuesday mornings from 7:45 to 8:15 Pacific Standard Time. I do a morning practice, and I help people get grounded, get into their genitals, get into their heart, move that energy so that they can move through their day and their life with, you know, with ease and grace. And you can find me at deborahkat.com. And I'm
Start with
imagining
a K.
that's correct, DeborahKat.com. And so that's what I'm really passionate about. I also have the Better Sex for Couples Summit coming up. I'm literally just in the planning and stages of that. So that's to come. But you know, check me out I'm here on Instagram, deborahkat.com, or excuse me, Deborah Tantra Kat here on Instagram. And the Better Sex podcast is also, gosh, I'm up to a lot of things in the world, apparently.
Well, this is where you're like, you may not be raising other humans, but you're still nurturing other human beings
Yeah.
through your work. And as someone who has tried to be a mother and it just didn't work out physiologically or whatever, that's a piece of myself that I've had to come to realize, like, yes, and we're mother to bazillions of bacteria, and we wrote the Big Book of Kombucha, which everyone calls the Bible, and I'm the president of the trade association. Like, I'm nourishing, nurturing, putting out mother energy to all kinds of people who I've never met a lot of times, and who just are able to, through my work, pick up on that energy and be nourished and healed by it. And I think probably the things you're doing is the same. And I love that you're doing the summit. You're dancing it into being. You're going to that scary place and just trusting that the energy that's flowing through you is exactly what needs to be. And so I'm excited for all that you have coming up. And so your podcast, we can find that on Spotify and everywhere that podcasts are found. Is that right?
Absolutely. I'm on Spotify, I'm on Apple, I'm on Google, I'm on all the places. And I would love, I love when people send me questions. Again, it can be here on Instagram or elsewhere, but like, I love to have questions because it helps me guide who comes to talk with me and what we talk about. Because here's the thing, right? Most of us have never had somebody that we can really talk about sex with. And I find myself, that's a place that I really love to be, because it's like, it's so easy to, to just not ask because we don't want to look
To not
silly.
ask, to not explore, to just accept a minimum to, and think that's okay. And yet there's a part of you that's yearning to be fully expressed. And so absolutely, I think we need that best friend who we can, get that real sex talk from so that we can evolve or unfold into more of our beingness and our presence.
So that we can move beyond chopsticks into choking or Led Zeppelin.
I like both of those. Well, and I think speaking of, we have a really great giveaway. You have so generously offered to do a free coaching session. And so we're going to have details tomorrow on how people can get, who can win that promotion. So stay tuned here to Kombucha Camp and we'll get that over to you. But Deborah, it's been so lovely to connect with you and share your work and all of this with everybody. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh my God, my pleasure. And I thank you. Thank you for asking. Thank you for mothering. Thank you for all that you do in the world and for supporting me and all of the other folks that get to come on your show and all the people who are responding and listening. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for listening to this preview here on YouTube. If you'd like to hear the rest of this interview, along with other useful resources such as show notes, links, and special offers, we'd love to extend an invitation for you to join our Kombucha Camp Plus Bubbles with Benefits member rewards program. By becoming a member, you'll earn bubbles with every Kombucha Camp purchase for free products, and that's not all. We also offer birthday Booch Day rewards, access to members-only sales, high-quality bonus content, including Kombucha Clutch Hangs with me, the Kombucha Mama, and my special guests, a free digital brew journal to track your master brews and experiments, and more. Now here's the best part. It is only $7.99 a month, or $79.99 for the year. You get 2 months free with the annual membership. You can learn more and join our Bubbles with Benefits program at kombuchacamp.com/kombuchacamp+.html. Don't forget, that's camp with a K, because we're cute and clever over here. And don't forget, trust your gut.